What is at the center of almost any video game? Violence. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's fun. But still, it feels insulting to reduce video games to just a sequence of button presses that result in splatters of blood and a growing combo number. Because there is so much more to them than that. There are stories among them that are leagues above most yearly Hollywood blockbusters. Their soundtracks are often the best orchestral music of the modern times, and the ever-improving performance capture technologies bring the in-game characters to life better than ever with each new game. If the developers actually put the work in, that is. All that being said though, violence is often at the center of video games. And not just in gameplay. Video games tend to be set in violent, harsh worlds, and worlds like this make for wonderful love story settings as they inherently come with stakes. The characters we play as experience love as something that typically cannot be taken for granted, as well as something that can be ripped away from them at any point. So let's dive into a few separate examples to see how exactly love is addressed in different video game stories. Ezio's trilogy of Assassin's Creed is our childhood. It is a beloved classic at this point. We love to get in the shoes of the role model that Ezio Auditore da Firenze represented. He was a fearless man taking on the task of avenging his family, but also doing good for others along the way. And he wasn't always honorable or polite, which is exactly what was so cool about him. Until this day, Ezio is seen by many as the best written Assassin's Creed character, romance included. And indeed, Ezio's love story, or rather, love stories,
his Katsu was engaged to 6 others,
are not bad by gaming's metrics.
What?
What?
Why are you just standing there?
Cristina is the first love of Ezio's life. Their story is one that begins on a very hopeful note, but fate tears them apart quite early on. Even though they do end up meeting a few more times after the fact, they never find the opportunity to get back together. Or rather, they never even have the chance to discuss their options fully, as all their subsequent encounters are so brief. The story concludes with Cristina's death, which Ezio was very close to preventing. And unfortunately, we do not see this event changing Ezio too much. It's not like he's a character that would try very hard to conceal his feelings, no. Rather, some feelings aren't exactly written into his character yet. However, instead of only pinning the absence of feelings to the writers of the game, we can also assume that these are feelings that are very difficult for Ezio to address, as his relationship with Cristina was actually one of deep love. It merely didn't have the time to flourish. Either way, Ezio's feelings are indeed explored in greater depth in Revelations, in a kind of retrospective way, precisely in seeing how Ezio approaches his next major love interest.
My interests were mainly...
Sofia is Ezio's second main love interest, which follows quite a different path. She's a learned woman who helps Ezio with his mission, as opposed to Cristina, who Ezio abandoned in order to protect her from his dangerous life. Ezio in Assassin's Creed Revelations has grown much since his Italy days, and it shows in the way he approaches relationships as well. He struggles initially with opening himself fully to the feeling of love again, due to the unaddressed trauma from the loss of Cristina. But in the end, he does decide to go through with it. He intends to keep Sofia close instead of pushing her away. And despite the strategy endangering her life, it also allows Ezio to protect her. He finally gets the good ending he never got with Cristina, which is fitting, considering the romantic and adventurous tone of the Italy games gets more or less replaced with themes of discovery and unearthing of secrets. This more grounded approach allows the last story of the trilogy to slowly ease into a satisfying ending to Ezio's personal life story, while the other story beats keep the rest of the narrative engaging. Nevertheless, as enjoyable as Cristina's and Sofia's stories are, Ezio's story isn't a love story. A romance subplot fits amazingly into the revenge-driven Renaissance story, and it does build Ezio's character to a greater depth in the end. But it doesn't hold enough importance to be the central theme of the plot, or the gameplay for that matter. A game in which love does influence the plot quite drastically is Star Wars Jedi Survivor. The first game of the Jedi series introduces Sister Merrin, whom Cal Kestis befriends and joins forces with. There are only subtle hints of a possible romance in the first game, if one can even call them hints, and half of the runtime of the second installation leaves the player in absence of Merrin. But the eventual reunion serves as a reacquainting experience for both these characters. They've both grown greatly since the last time they were together, and the connection they now have a chance to rebuild is destined to be much stronger than before. They had both been living very dangerous, sorrowful lives for a long time, and the dialogue exchanges they share show that they are not only happy to take a break from that together, but that they also genuinely enjoy each other's company. Now, before I move on to the analysis of the romance between Cal and Merrin, I would like to ask you to consider subscribing if you've been enjoying this essay so far, as it truly does help substantially. Back to Star Wars. The story of the prequel trilogy of Star Wars is pushed forward constantly by one element: love. Anakin Skywalker falls in love with Padme the moment he first sets his eyes on her, and it is his love that eventually flips the power structure of the galaxy upside down in Episode 3, when Anakin just goes,
"Hail Satan, I submit to the dark side,"
in order to try and save her life. The Jedi games, at least for now, seem to follow the template of the original trilogy rather than the prequels. While the central themes of Episode 4 and Fallen Order are hope and wonder, Survivor ends on a much darker note than its first part, not unlike Episode 5 of Star Wars. The parallel of
I am your father
is Bode's ultimate betrayal, but this is where these two stories diverge. The Empire Strikes Back ends with Luke's confusion and disbelief, whereas Jedi Survivor goes further, because Cal tries to take the helm to resolve the newly introduced issue right away. This is where the game changes tracks and becomes more of a potential allegory to Anakin. Cal seeks to mend what was broken, but because of his love for Merrin, the path forward is shrouded in uncertainty and possible sorrow, which makes him tap into the dark side a few times along the way. When he does ultimately face Bode and the life of his lover is threatened, he doesn't hesitate to embrace his darkness truly to save her from death. The character of Cal Kestis is developed in multiple ways throughout the story of the game, and his love for Merrin was one of the leading factors advancing the plot, but it has never been the main one. Jedi Survivor still isn't a love story, is it? Maybe AAA video games aren't meant to portray love at their center point. Or maybe they just have to take a different approach than movies, since the pacing of a video game is unavoidably always going to differ from the pacing of a film. There is a game that did just that. A game that wrote a story of love so powerful that it serves as motivation for every step the main characters take, as opposed to serving as a break from gameplay, or only appearing as a secondary plot driver. Kratos made a promise to his wife, Faye. She had wanted her ashes to be taken to the highest peak of all the realms after her death, so that's what Kratos and his son Atreus are doing. And that's it. Purely in the scope of the 2018 God of War game, we never see the face of Faye, we never hear her voice, and only after witnessing her funeral at the beginning of the game do we begin to gradually learn more of what she was like from the dialogue between Kratos and Atreus. There is still adventure. Gods still fall to the hand of the Ghost of Sparta. But the thing that drives the plot forward is always the love Kratos holds for his late wife. The journey begins at home and ends at the highest mountain in the world. Compared to Assassin's Creed games and the Jedi games, love is the most important theme in God of War, even despite the lover in question already being dead before the game even begins. Arguably, the absence of Faye only enhances the importance of love within God of War, as it is presented as an objectivity, an absolute. Not to mention it also leaves more space for the player's imagination, as everyone will, without question, find their own way to identify with the story. The last time we saw Kratos, chronologically speaking, he only had remnants of humanity within himself, venting his rage on everyone without distinguishing. For that reason exactly, it carries even more weight to see him changed like this. His love for Faye must have been, and still remains to be, quite substantial. Not only does love serve as a motivational factor for our characters, it also enhances their personalities. Seeing Kratos at this point in life, ready to fulfill his loved one's last wish instead of going on a killing spree like he did in God of War 3, gives him his humanity back. These three games all approach love in their own way. While Assassin's Creed is a more traditional Renaissance tragedy, Jedi Survivor is free to experiment on the canvas that the fictional world of Star Wars offers, and God of War roots love deep in the backstory of the main character, as well as using it as a driving force for the plot. All these instances of love are strongly influenced by hostility of their respective worlds, which has an immense potential to enhance their effectiveness. However, none of them can be classified as conventional romance fiction. They are video games, and they will never be able to portray romance and love the way that it is portrayed by literature or movies. But they don't need to try and emulate them. Narrative designers of video games need to free themselves of the assumption that it's necessary to follow convention. Instead, they should embrace the unique strengths that interactive storytelling brings, as it gives them a chance to redefine romance in a way that no other media can. And because love is one of the most powerful themes that can form the soul of a game.